And we're back. Let's talk cathedrals. Not churches, not basilicas, not chapels, not oratories. Let's talk cathedrals. What makes something a cathedral and not a basilica? Here's all you need to know. A cathedral is where a bishop finds his office. That's really all you need to know. A cathedral is where a bishop finds his office. Now, it doesn't matter which religion it is. Quite a few of the ones we're going to look at are connected with the Roman Catholic Church. But they do not have to be connected with the Roman Catholic Church. But most cathedrals are connected with the Roman Catholic Church. Picture, if you will, you are living in the year 1185. We'll just pick something out of a hat. And you've just survived a plague, and you live in France, and you decide that it's time to take a pilgrimage. And you're going to go to Amiens or Rouen or Paris to go to the cathedral there to pray and to worship. And so you set off on the road, and away you go. And as you approach the city gates, well before you approach the city gates, you can see the cathedral off in the distance, usually built on a hill. And as you get closer, it gets bigger and bigger, and it gets more and more ornate. And you approach it to enter from the west. Most cathedrals were built so the altar faces the east, and the congregation enters from the west. And as we've seen before, you enter through a grand portal of a very large door that has what above it on the tympanum? Anyone? Usually has some form of illustration, sculpture that has to do with the Last Judgment to kind of remind you of why you're there. So as you enter through the portal, you go to view the relics, you go to pray to the different saints for that particular cathedral. And here's a key one. You go there to be taught the word by the church. Well, of course you do. That's why you go to church, right? But remember, this is like 1180, 1185, 1189, somewhere around there. The printing press wasn't invented until 1450. Only royalty, noblemen, the clergy knew how to read. Very, very few people knew how to read. So the churches at this time were like a giant picture book. Think of them as a giant picture book. Now you may be saying, well, that's sacrilege. Well, no, it's really not. They had to get the word across in any way they could. So if the Mass is given in Latin, and a lot of people in the congregation don't speak Latin, then what do? You have to give them pictures to look at, or sculptures to look at, that sort of thing. So as you go into the cathedral, there are certain things, the types of imagery that they would use. And I'm just going to show you a few, just kind of quick, and then we'll go more in depth on specific cathedrals and that sort of thing. But these are the types of things that you could expect to see visually in a cathedral. You could see paintings, frescoes, eventually. Early churches in the Byzantine times were more mosaics made up of crushed glass, broken pottery, shards of this, that, and the other thing to get different colors. And then eventually you would get frescoes, which are paint or pigment mixed with lime and water, which creates plaster. And so it becomes part of the wall. So what you see here is an actual fresco that is part of the wall. You can't go and take part of the painting away without actually taking part of the wall away. As I said before, you have mosaics to tell the story. You get little bits and pieces of the story of Christ and the New Testament and different saints and the lives of the saints. You'll often see the Stations of the Cross. Even nowadays, if you go into a church, especially if you go into a Roman Catholic church, look on the walls around the entire edge of the inside of the church. You'll usually see about 14, give or take, sometimes more, sometimes less. But, usually there's around 14, and then they'll have the very last one will be the 15th, and that'll be Christ rising from the dead on the third day. But that may be in an altarpiece or one piece all by itself right as you walk in, that sort of thing. So you have the plight of Jesus as he goes through. You'll see that on the walls, and you can literally just go station to station, and you can get the information as they're telling it to you, but you can also see it in picture form. And you also have altarpieces. Now, if I had my way, we would go into an entire thing about altarpieces, and we still may, depending on if we can get everything together before the end of the semester. But you would have altarpieces, and different parts of altarpieces are open for different holidays. They have doors on them. This one here is the Marodi altarpiece, and the two side panels are actually doors, and they will close. So they'll have it closed on certain holidays and open on other holidays. The main, in the middle image of this one is the Annunciation. So you have the angel of the Lord in the white with the wings, and he is telling Mary over here that she will be the mother of the Son of Man. And then over here in his workshop, you have Joseph. Notice that Mary's not wearing blue in this one because she has not been anointed to be the mother of the Son of Man yet. So just a little bit. Those are the types of things that you would see. And so you'd be bombarded with all this visual imagery in addition to all the sculptures and those sorts of things that would be on the outside representing different saints and the life of Christ, and also people in the church and royalty at the time. So you get the whole story and more just through the visuals. So now let's look at some buildings. Architecture, all sorts. There's a few things you need to know to be able to fully grasp how the structure is made. So let's talk. What is the Gothic style? We've talked about it a little bit. So let's go back over it here real quick. The Gothic style, in terms of the cathedrals, started in Paris, in an area around Paris. Not Paris itself, but an area around Paris called the Ile-de-France. Where is that? Think the suburbs. Okay, before there were suburbs in Paris, that's kind of this area around. And so they started to pop up into these little towns and that sort of thing that kind of constitute a bit of the suburb area of Paris, but it goes out quite far. Here's a name you need to know. Abbot Sugar. At St. Denis, I'll show it to you in just a second, his ideas were a deviation from the original traditional church architecture. He wanted to bring God in all forms into the building, into the structure. So in terms of craftsmanship, in terms of the materials, the highest materials that you could possibly use, gold leaf, silver leaf, hand carvings, people showing their talents, their God-given talents, and light, and reaching up as high as it can go into the heavens. And there's many different ways that you can do that. And the Gothic architects and the Gothic craftsmen took that to the nth degree. Remember, there was a guy named Vasari in the 16th century, now that's the 1700s, he came up with the term Gothic. Remember, this is after all these buildings were started and built, basically. So Vasari was an art historian, and he came up with Gothic, and so it was attributed to that style from the Germanic tribes, the Visigoths, Gothic, and they kind of helped destroy Roman civilization. So the Roman arch, the rounded arch, the Gothic arch becomes pointed. It's taking the place of the Roman arch, or becoming more prominent in the Gothic style. Let's do a little vocabulary, shall we? What you see here is what's called a Latin cross plan. Latin cross just means it's got a long nave, long aisle, and a transept. And if you look kind of on your side, tilt your head to the side, it looks like a cross, a standard one, a long vertical with a shorter horizontal. That horizontal is called the transept. The long section is called the nave. The part down at the end it's called the chancel and the choir, and around that is what's called the ambulatory. And then you have all these little chapels and stuff around it. Notice the altar, which is up by where the ambulatory and the chancel is, it faces east. The porch over on the other end, through the nave, through the bay, all that, that's where you would enter. You enter from the west, and then the transept would always run north and south. This is what it would look like from above. This is Amiens Cathedral, and it is your very stereotypical Latin cross layout. On the other hand, you have what's called a Greek cross layout. Think the red cross, the symbol for the red cross, where the vertical of the cross and the horizontal of the cross are the same width, same size. Now you can take off these two little rooms down here at the bottom, but the main structure here in the middle, it's equal distance top to bottom, left to right. That's what's called a Greek cross. Okay, and there's two very specific. Most of your Gothic cathedrals were of a Latin cross. The Greek cross was more of a Byzantine an earlier style. So here it is. Here's what's considered to be the first quote-unquote Gothic church. Notice it has Roman arches all on it. All the arches here are rounded. Okay. All these are going to start to look the same. So there's a few things to look for. So in the Abbey Church of St. Denis, it only has one bell tower kind of off to the right, usually when you look at it from the front. So remember that. Abbey Church, one bell tower, A, first letter in the alphabet, one bell tower, A, go with that. But this is considered to be the first one. And this is what Abbot Sugar did. He started to lift things up and design things. He wanted more openness and air and light coming in. And he did that, like I said, through gilding and gold leaf and stained glass, using all sorts of colors of stained glass to let in light, and then using the glass as more imagery and pictures for the story. I forgot what this part says right here. To Sugar, light and color was the way to bring in a fullness of God, of religion, bringing in illumination to the soul, and connecting the person not just to the building, not just to religion, but to God himself. Instead of just coming and being hammered over the head with information, you can go in and just bask in the glory, just bask in the light that is. Now here's a little something different. You've probably never seen this building here in front with the little red cap on top of it that looks like upside down snow cone. That's the baptistry at the cathedral complex in Pisa. And then you have the cathedral, and then that funny little thing in the back, yep, that's the leaning tower, all right? It's called a campanile. It's a bell tower. That's what you have to remember. And then there's some very specific parts that go with this thing, this particular chapel, the cathedral. Sorry, I'm going to mix words. The cathedral, at the top of this particular cathedral, for about 800 years, you had this. It was a griffin. And what's wrong with this image? If you look at it really closely, it has Islamic writing on it. Now, why would an Islamic griffin sculpture be on the top of a Roman Catholic church? Because it was used to commemorate a victory over the Muslims during a war that Pisa, the town of, led in 1063.